The Navarrorum exhibition takes its name from the way that the Basque language was known in the 12th century. Lingua Navarrorum, in other words, the language of the Navarrese. A language that was spoken for centuries but not written. Yet despite this, there are 36 documents illustrating the social evolution of the Basque language in Navarre over no less than 2,000 years. These texts, written on stone, parchment and paper, prove that Basque has always been an essential part of Navarre, and reveal that without Navarre, the past and present of the Basque language cannot be fully understood. At the start of our era, the Roman armies reached what today is Navarre and encounter the Vascones. The majority of them speak an ancient form of Basque. The conquest starts the cultural Romanization. Gradually, Roman ways of life are taken on, shared across the whole empire. Laws, administration, city life, the economy, customs. The territory of the Vascones becomes part of the Roman world, more intensively in the agricultural lands in the center and south of the region than in the wooded mountains. Roman occupation also entails the imposition of Latin as the official language. Little by little, all the indigenous languages disappear, apart from Basque. An explanation behind the survival of the Basque language has not yet been given. Following the invasion of the Germanics and a lengthy economic crisis, by the 5th century all remains of Roman authority have disappeared in Navarre. The linguistic Latinization continues via the slow diffusion across the territory of a new religion, Christianity. After 5 centuries of Roman realm, the way of life of the Vascones and their language take on a new lease of life. Very few documents have survived from the Roman period. Short inscriptions engraved in stone or on coins, medieval copies of stories, etc. In these findings, none mention the language of the Vascones. The names of people and gods are the only indications that allow us to assess the Roman linguistic and cultural penetration in the world of the Vascones and the degree of symbiosis between both. The first medieval centuries are dark ages for discovering the history of the independent Vascones. Only their enemies, the Visigoths and Franks first, then Muslims after, cite them in the campaigns that they led against them. The Franks from the north now begin to call them the Navarrese. Forged from resistance, at the beginning of the 9th century, the kingdom of Pamplona emerges. It slowly begins to conquer lands in the south and the west, until it crosses the river Ebro, becoming, for a short while, the most important Christian kingdom. In the 12th century, adopting the name of its inhabitants, it becomes the Kingdom of Navarre. The loss of Álava, Guipúzcoa, and the eastern half of Biscay is compensated in part by the union of Baja Navarre, Lower Navarre. The kingdom organizes itself internally with the founding of neighborhoods and towns filled with traders and craftspeople and governed by its own laws. It is the peak of the Middle Ages. Christianization is complete. Navarre is filled with villages, castles and Romanesque buildings, as well as pilgrims walking to Santiago. The culture continues to be linked to the monasteries and Latin. Society becomes increasingly varied with the addition of small communities of French people, Muslims and Jews, and their own languages to the Navarran majority. More documentation is beginning to emerge from the new and old monasteries, in the cities and towns, and in court. Latin is still used for writing, a language that has not been understood in the streets for centuries. However, the majority of the population continues to speak Basque, the language that is not written. last centuries of the Middle Ages are times of crisis and transformation. Poor harvests, famine, plagues and wars have been ongoing since the start of the 14th century, causing great depopulation and misery. Despite difficulties, Navarre reorganizes itself. With the arrival of the French monarchs, the laws of the kingdom, el fuero, are put into writing. The assembly is born, representing the kingdom, the courts, and the territorial government and the justice system are perfected. Turning its back on the hardships, the Navarran court flourishes in the palace of Olite. The Gothic cathedral of Pamplona is constructed. Yet in the second half of the 15th century, a drawn-out civil war sees a confrontation between Beaumont and the Agramont lines and ruins the country. Trapped between powerful and aggressive neighbors, France is the cultural and political benchmark of this period. This is where its monarchy, governors, and bishops come from. This is where its leading classes study, and this is the birthplace of fashions. The production of documentation increases. Cities and universities join the monasteries in the culture generation. Navarran chroniclers start to relate the history of the kingdom. Despite Latin still being the language of written documents, in the courts and in the cities it is replaced by French, Occitan and the Navarran Romance, which will eventually become the official language of the kingdom. However, in homes, in the street, and even in court, the majority of Navarran people continue to speak Basque. Moreover, the few that know how to write the language start to write it. The good times return in the 16th century, the Renaissance period. The population and the economy surge, classical culture recovers, and the great discoveries expand the known world: Africa, Asia, and in particular, America. It is also a time of rupture. The religious reform divides Europe between Catholics and Protestants. At the start of the century, the Spanish conquest puts an end to the independent Navarre and fractures the kingdom down in the Pyrenees. Two Navarres emerge, which join their fate to two rival nations, Spain and France. Printing revolutionizes culture and languages. In their fight for souls, the Catholics continue to cling to Latin, whilst the Protestants encourage native languages so as to indoctrinate the people in their own language. The powerful monarchs begin their political centralization and their emerging administrations, driving for a single language: Castilian from Burgos, French from Paris, and English from the south. There is competition between Latin and the other national languages on the one side, and these and other regional languages and dialects on the other. Printing and administrations also cause the standardization of languages. Their origins are researched, and grammar, spelling, and vocabulary are set. Basque, which continues to be the dominant language spoken in the kingdom, appears in documentation. At last, its use begins in written and printed form, almost always for religious indoctrination. The stagnation of the population and the economy, the religious wars and wars for European dominance seemed to justify the 17th century being known as a tragic century. It was for Spain. These are the times of the military decadence of France in the continent and of England in the seas, also of its internal breakdown through secessions in Catalonia and Portugal, something that contrasts with the splendor of literature in Castilian. For Navarre, however, these are times of political and identity strength and the emergence of its own historiography. Corn and remittances of rich returning migrants arrive from America. This is the Baroque century and that of the Catholic offensive against the Protestant world. This is translated into the linguistic world. Rome drives forward the evangelization of the people in their own language. Despite Latin persisting in holy books and in liturgy, bilingual catechisms appear in Basque and Romance. Ignored by the administration and the school, the Basque language only receives a hint of acknowledgement in the church and in homes. Education in Castilian spreads across the villages of Navarre in detriment to Basque. Castilian in the south and French in the north, driven by the machinery of powerful monarchs, both take on prestige and dominance. The Basque language, which continues to be a spoken language, becomes identified with the countryside. Little by little, as with all popular elements, it falls into disrepute because of the expansion of the elite ideology impregnated with rationalism and science. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the contemporary world is born. The population grows, and the economy too, with the development of agriculture and trade. The modern nation-states emerge. The great empires are constructed. Sciences are developed, and society becomes more complex and secular. It is the age of enlightenment, reason, capitalism, the bourgeoisie, and also of political revolutions and cultural romanticism. In Navarre, there are two contrasting centuries. The 18th century is that of peace. The towns grow, roads are improved, and public works increase. Political tensions, however, expand as Spain moves forward political centralism and cultural uniformity. The 19th century, on the other hand, is a century of wars, first against France, then civil wars. As a result, Navarre turns poorer and becomes a province in a state forged around one king, one religion, and one language. The progressive expansion of schools and the public administration impose Castilian. Basque is banned from the educational, cultural, and administrative spheres. Little by little, it is also removed from religion. Outcast from towns, the Basque language becomes a rural language and will undergo an ongoing geographical and social decline. Paradoxically, linguistics and romanticism give the Basque language a space for recognition. There are many studies of the language and publications of grammar guides and dictionaries. It also becomes a literary theme and a central element of first a pro-Basque movement and then political nationalism. Today, we no longer have to search through thousands of documents to find just a few scarce words or phrases in the Basque language tucked away in the margins of official documents. From the end of the 19th century to modern times, the Navarrese society has begun to realize that marginalizing the Basque language in official bodies constitutes an anomaly and a historical injustice that needs to be stopped. After overcoming civil conflicts and dictatorships, the Basque language has set off on a slow yet steady pathway to revitalization. Since the 1970s, the language has been increasingly present in teaching, administration, the publishing world, and the media. As a result of this, the descending curve of speakers has been reversed, and a gradual recovery has begun. Today, Basque is the language spoken by an increasing number of Navarrese people.